Today, the update is speaking to Kamila Shamsie, who's the author of 5 books, including Burnt Shadows. She's a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, and she grew up in Karachi and now lives in London. Could you briefly explain who you are and what you do?
My name is Kamila Shamsie. I'm a writer, novelist primarily. I grew up in Pakistan and have been living in London for the last 10 years.
So, which books are you most proud of?
Hard to say really which books you're most proud of. In some ways, the first one is always a big deal because that was the first one that got published, which was called In the City by the Sea. But you also always feel embarrassed about your earlier work because you like to hope you've got better. So the most recent one, which is called Home Fire, is the one that at the moment I'm feeling best about. But by the time I work on the next thing, I'll be embarrassed by this one.
Why did you choose writing as a career, and is it something you were always interested in, or did you?
I've always wanted to be a writer. I've always loved reading. So when I was a child, I used to read a novel a day. Like no day was complete unless there was a whole novel. It's the only thing really that I want to do since the age of about 9 or so. And I went to university, studied creative writing, and had my first novel published before I was done with university. So I just really kept going.
As a Muslim living in London, have you ever experienced racial hatred or intolerance?
The thing is, if I walk down the street in London, people from looking at me don't generally know I'm Muslim. So women I know who wear hijab say they face a lot more. I don't face it personally, but I hear comments all the time, and there's no avoiding that, whether it's directed at you or whether people are talking on the news or in government or standing next to you. It's very much something I'm aware of.
Okay. We had this question in the talk as well, but in your latest novel, Home Fire, there's the character Pervez, who is persuaded to join ISIS in Syria. How did you? The account is very believable and frightening. But where did you get the inspiration for?
I had to. When I started the novel, I thought, like most people did, that it's a very simple issue where certain young men who are very drawn by violence and anger get pulled into ISIS. But I started doing quite a lot of research around the subject, and one of the things that I discovered was how sophisticated and complex ISIS, their recruitment was, and how it drew in all kinds of vulnerabilities of the young. And so really it was through the research that I was able to sort of say, well, if they're targeting people and saying, come here, there's no racism, come here, you will live in a nice welfare state, come here, you'll be able to ride around the street on horses and look wonderful, which is the kind of thing the propaganda does. I sort of went back from that and thought, well, what kind of young man might be drawn into this? So it was one of those cases where you look at all the research, but then you go away and do a lot of filling in with your own imagination.
Did you talk to any people who experienced something similar? Or?
I didn't. I didn't talk to any of... it's very hard to find ISIS recruits. They're not standing up and saying, I went and joined ISIS. I read some interviews with people who had either been in Syria or knew people who had. And I also read quite a lot by people who'd been radicalized at other points or in different ways. So not necessarily with Syria and ISIS, but who had gone through a process of radicalization and had come out the other side and were able to talk about how that went. So there's a man called Shiraz Maher who works now in de-radicalization stuff. And he's very interesting on how he, as a young 18-year-old, was drawn into this world and why and how.
Do you have a favorite character in your books? So let's say Home Fire.
I don't have... Well, in Home Fire, what was interesting to me was as I was writing it, I was expecting... There was one character I expected to dislike, because the novel is in 5 parts, and each part is from a different point of view. And the last point of view is a conservative politician who is a British Muslim and very tough on security issues. And I was surprised when I started writing him that I liked him a lot more than I thought I would have. But largely, when you write, it's you're sort of in the head of whoever you're writing about, and at that point, they're commanding all your sympathy.
And so you talked about the conservative Muslim politician. How do you come up with these characters? Are they based in real life?
Not. I mean, for me, the fun of writing fiction is in invention and making people up. So there are some writers I know who will, draw from their friends and family in the world around them. I'm more interested in thinking, trying to create a character from nothing. Obviously, you look at the world around you, and you try and figure out what's plausible. But it's hard to say exactly how it happens. With this novel, because it's partly based on a play, it's partly based on Sophocles' Antigone. So I had the character of this tyrant from a 2,000-year-old play, and I just thought, how would I adapt him for modern times? So that's sort of how that works.
Considering your background, do you believe that you have a role in expanding your readers' knowledge and perceptions of Pakistan?
I don't think of it as a role, but it's and partly I don't think of it as a role because a lot of my readers are from Pakistan and don't need me expanding their knowledge and perception, although some probably do. But I think it's one of the nice things that comes from being a novelist is that people will come up to you and say that when they read your book, they were able to see things differently. And certainly because Pakistan is a place that is understood in such narrow terms, terrorism, Taliban, that kind of thing. And so it's always a pleasure when someone comes and says, I read your book and was able to think about this place differently, but it's not the reason I write. I write because I love the novel, I love writing. That has always been the main reason for it.
Okay. What advice would you give to someone at this school who's considering writing as a career?
I would say don't think, first of all, about writing as a career. Just think about writing. Just think about getting the work done. For a lot of people, it doesn't become a viable career until much later. I know a lot of my friends who are writers spend a while doing something else, holding down other jobs as well. But if you're serious about it, then the one thing that you have to do as a writer is to find time to write. And that's often the hardest thing to do. But without it, if you keep saying, the number of people out in the world who have books they want to write and have been waiting 20 years or 30 years for the right moment. You just have to make your moments, I think.
Finally, what are 3 books that you think, what are 3 books that matter to you and you think people should read and why?
Okay, 3 books. The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje is an amazing novel which I first read when it came out. I was at university, it was a very long time ago. And it's one of the few books that I keep rereading. It's set in at the end of the Second World War, 4 or 5 people from different places combined. It's just brilliant in terms of story, structure, writing, larger themes. It's just a really beautiful book. So that would be one of them. The other one, Muhammad Hanif's A Case of Exploding Mangoes, which is a novel set in Pakistan in the 80s. And it's a very, very funny book and also a very dark book about the death of a dictator. And I think people don't write enough funny, serious fiction anymore. And that book is a really good example of the way to do it. So that's my second. Third, Ali Smith's Autumn. So Ali Smith has been one of my favorite writers for a long time, and at the moment she's working on a cycle of novels. She's writing 1 a year, autumn, winter, spring and summer. And it's that really exciting thing where she's writing novels about the present. So Autumn was published in October, the year Brexit happened. And Brexit had happened 3 months earlier, but it was already there in the novel. And it's so rare to find a novel that is speaking that directly and immediately that it's, I think, a real thrill and pleasure too.
Okay, thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.